One championship, 8 races, legendary circuits, drivers from all over the world, one family, one passion, endurance racing. Welcome to the most professional endurance racing series for all drivers, amateurs, semi-professional and professional. Welcome to the 24-hour series powered by Hankook. Can you beat the challenge of 8 endurance races? Will you become the 24-hour series champion for 2021? This is endurance.
Greetings from the Rhine Valley and from a fabulous racetrack which has existed for nearly 90 years. The HOCKENHEIMRIng, as it is known these days, is the venue of round 4 of the 24H series, powered by Hankook and brought to you, of course, by the Dutch promotion Creventic. My name's Johnny Palmer, joined by the full team from the Radio Show Limited network, and we'll introduce those bit by bit as we go. Got quite a team, actually, looking after matters through the course of today and tomorrow. The 12 hours of Hockenheimring is a split race, so much so that we have a little portion of it today and slightly more of it tomorrow, but we'll work you through the intricacies of that very shortly indeed. But to give you the perspective of where this race sits in this year's calendar, we've had 3 races and there'll be 4 after this one. Dubai kicked things off in January. That was a 24-hour race. Then we had the split 12-hour Mugello event in Tuscany at the end of March with 4 hours on the Friday night and then 8 hours on Saturday. Similar situation. Well, no, it was a straight-through race, wasn't it, in Circuit Paul Ricard in the south of France for the 12 hours in April. Then we're here in Germany, and we move on with 2 back-to-back 24-hour races in July and September in Portimao and Barcelona, respectively. The second ever Coppa Florio 12 Hours of Sicily will be at the start of October, and the very exciting second flyaway event is at Sebring, Florida, 24 hours on the concrete / asphalt there, and that's over the weekend of the 18th, 19th and 20th of November. So a splendid calendar laid out in front of us. And once we get to the end of this one, we'll kind of get more of an idea of where the championships are going, because that will bring us to half distance. A really good entry spanning lots of different classes. Remember, there'll be 2 races in one as usual, the GT series and the TCE series, and qualifying is moments away for both of those divisions. I'll bring in Joe Bradley very shortly, who joins me in the Global Commentary Centre. But before we get to Joe, Ben Constanduris is looking after things in the pit lane.
Good morning, gents. Welcome along to the pit lane. Oh, that's not very nice at all, is it? That's because of the speaker there. Welcome along to the pit lane. Welcome along to the Hockenheimring. It really does smell of history here, as Johnny's just said. It's an old circuit with so much history, and of course we're on a newer layout. I wanted to point out the blue sky behind me, but we've already switched around. Blue sky over there, but if you look towards turn 1, grey sky, and these clouds are moving very, very quickly. We had huge overnight rain, so some of the curbs will certainly be harbouring some water for this qualifying session, but ultimately I think the track is dry. But really, who knows today and tomorrow what weather might be befalling our drivers. We have the TCR qualifying kicking off in a few seconds time. There's just 8 TCE cars on track, so traffic shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then we go into a larger group of GT3, GTX, 911 cars and the like. So we get ourselves ready, the TCR cars heading down to the end of pit lane, and I'll hand back up to you.
That's Ben Constanduris, and any stories that break over the next 30-minute session, or indeed the following one, we'll be straight back to Ben to get news. Obviously, the plan is for qualifying to go seamlessly without any troubles at all. Set the order for TCE first of all, and then the busier GT Series event. These cars have already had an hour and 20 minutes worth of free practice, and that happened yesterday evening. That is the plan, Joe Bradley, and good morning to you. But sometimes you get those issues that creep up this early on in the morning in qualifying. I suppose it's better to have them in this session rather than the race which kicks off later on today.
Morning, John. Morning, Ben. Morning, everybody. I'm just happy to be at Hockenheim, Johnny. It's a track that, you know, it's been described as flat and bland and featureless, but I tell you what, you'll find it very hard to find somewhere as challenging. We've got such a mix of corners, and it's the sort of track where the officials are going to be very, very tight on track limits, because exceeding track limits can really, really give you a massive advantage. And we're going to talk about that much later. But for now, though, Johnny, going into this qualifying session, yes, very much indeed. It's the sort of day where we compact everything together, isn't it? Qualifying, and then we're very much straight into the race. So I don't think the teams will be messing about too much, what with qualifying setups and race setups. You really haven't got time. You've got to get out there this morning, put in your, what I call a banker lap, and then try and push to see how far up the grid you can get. And again, it comes down to the old adage, just how important is qualifying for such a long 12-hour race? We can debate that one over a few beers, I would imagine.
Well, I'd say particularly here, and certainly at Ricard, Joe, actually just track position. So staying out front and having a clear road in front of you is important. You remember what kicked off at Ricard last month through what I said was a bit of a pinch point? Well, the Nord curve here at Hockenheim is a little like that as well. I think from a rolling start, it's always a bit tricky to know what sort of speed you're approaching Nord curve, because it will be slower than a normal lap. So you're getting up to speed. How much do you hit the brakes? It is one of those corners that you can allow the car to wash out a little bit on the exit, but I'm sure track limits will be very much being observed coming out of Nord curve, because there is so much runoff, and you can also breach the track limits on the entry as well. Although actually looking at the way that the track is formed this year, there is that strip of gravel track that probably prevents you from running too far to the left on approach. Still plenty of curb, and then a little bit more runoff beyond the blue and white curbing on the exit of the corner. You then after that short burst of throttle, hit the brakes into turns 2, 3 and 4 that arrive in very quick succession, and then it's flat all the way through that left-hand arcing parabolica into the classic overtaking area at the hairpin, which is turn 6. You're then rejoining the old Grand Prix circuit to head from 6 to 7. I think that used to be, though, continuous from 7 all the way into turn 11, whereas these days you head through the right-hand kink at 7, left-hander at Mercedes, which has a very large grandstand facing you as you approach. Sadly, no crowd in it this year. And then through the left and right kinks at 9 and 10, and then into the proper arena section. Mobile 1 is the turn 11, the more or less 90-degree right-hander, followed by the Sachs curve, which is turn 12. 13 and 14, very intricate S-bend right behind the paddock, and then into 15 and 16, the Sud curve to complete the lap. So Joe's quite right, it's incredibly challenging. There is a reason why in days gone by the DTM German Touring Car Championship used to start and end its campaign here. May still do that actually in these days, but it's just a great place when it's full of fans, particularly for the atmosphere, but also the challenge that it presents everybody. So cars are heading out onto track. As I say, this is not their first track action of the weekend, because at 5:40 last night there was an hour and 20 minutes worth of free practice, And in the GT3 category, it was the number 11 Middle Cap Racing by Scuderia Praha Ferrari of, Josef Kral set the free practice time, the best free practice time in the number 11 car from the 66 Higeli by T2 Racing Porsche and the Car Collection Motorsport Audi R8 number 34 of Max Edelhoff, Elmar Grimm and Gustav Edelhoff. But very much names to be reckoned with within this entry for the second ever 12 Hours of Hockenheimring. Names we've become well used to through the years in the 24H series, with a sprinkling of new talent as well. So that's exciting to try and work out who's going to be quick. A couple of KTMs in the entry as part of the GTX division, and the 991s well subscribed as well as part of the Porsches. We have GT4s, TCXs and TCRs, and the latter two there, the TCX and the TCR category, are the cars out on track. There's already a problem though, it looks like, Joe, for the 131 top car Cupra, which is going very slowly indeed. That's already set a good time. It's fastest by my reckoning, but it's ground to a halt. I was saying we don't want issues during this session, and that's exactly what's panning out for the 131. So double waved yellows just beyond Marshall Point 22. It is Ronnie Yost, the Swiss driver, in the top car Sport Cupra TCR.
Currently fastest, Johnny.
Yeah.
Well, all right, it's only the second fastest flying lap from that car. But at first I thought he may be just cooling off. But then I thought again, hang on a minute, you can't really cool the tyres off on a front-wheel drive car because you don't want the rears to lose their temperature. You've got to keep the temperature in the rears. So yeah, that car is now ground to a halt. I'm trying to locate where that car might be. Is that just out of the hairpin, Johnny, or...?
It looks like it. I don't quite know my Marshall posts well enough just yet, but
yeah, me too.
It's either coming out of the hairpin or heading towards it, but I would say it's just between turns 6 and 7. At the moment, only covered by yellow flags, so you are still permitted to attempt a quick lap, but of course you're going to have to show the marshals, show the race officials that you are at least backing off a little bit along that section of track. So not ideal. And
I'm not sure we're going to see any quick laps now, Johnny, with with that yellow flag section.
Exactly.
And I don't think it's a tactic from Ronnie Yost in the top car sport car. I'm not sure. He hasn't done a Schumacher there. I'm pretty sure he'll be a bit disgruntled for that from that car having ground to a halt.
Or a Nelson Piquet Jr. Mind you, it's not in the wall quite yet though. So,
yeah, that's true.
Not the same. But there's only one of their cars in the race, I believe, Top Car Sport. Right, tracker I need, and looking out for a car that is stopped somewhere out on track. 131. Yeah, it's not showing up, sadly, on my tracker system. But Ronnie Yost at least does have a 159.603 in the bank. And the question is now, what happens with that car? Because the clock is still ticking, and this is far from ideal for everybody else. Mathieu Detries just left the pits in the 188 AC Motorsport Audi RS3, the Belgian entered car for the Belgian pilot. And there's a towing vehicle now on the scene. So it looks like the 131 of Ronnie Yost will be recovered very swiftly indeed. Question is, where's the Top Car Sport car going to go? Will it be returned back to the pit lane somehow? I mean, it depends how the access roads are laid out here. It might be purely so that we can get the session going again, Joe, that the 131 just has to be returned to somewhere behind an Armco barrier, and it might be stuck out there till the end of the session now.
Yeah, you know what? It's always been the policy to recover cars to the pit lane during the race. However, qualifying might be a different matter, and we wait with bated anticipation to see if the 131 does make it back to the pit lane. Observation from Ben in the pits after he went into the hairpin, but then didn't accelerate out. It's as if he'd lost power into the hairpin and through the hairpin. So our observations were right, Johnny. It was just after the hairpin that car ground to a halt. But we wait and see any reports from Ben if that car appears on pit lane, and hopefully it's just a small reset and then back on. He's already been demoted from the fastest provisional time.
Yeah, so Marco Poland now jumping ahead of the time already set by Ronnie Joost by just over 0.4 of a second. So that's now a TCX car, which is fastest, the Munkhoff Racing BMW of the Netherlands. BMW M4 GTR for Marco Poland, rather. And the 105 car is now giving us the treat of this 4.5-kilometre circuit at the Hockenheimring. So it's a 105 of Rimvydas Savikas, the Lithuanian driver, piloting the GSR Motorsport Lithuanian team for Volkswagen Golf GTI TCR. And it's the little 2-litre turbocharged power plant you can hear in the background. Scrabbling for grip, it will be in a moment coming out of the hairpin, and fairly early on the brakes actually. These TCR cars have decent brakes, but obviously nothing like the GT3s can offer during the next 30-minute session, and the road is clear in front of Rimvydas now, so the Ronnie Joost car no longer a concern, as over the line late joining the session, but that doesn't seem to matter for Mathieu Detry because he's just set a 1:57.239 to give AC Motorsport provisional pole with their Audi. So he's 2 seconds clear of Ronnie Joost's effort, and Marco Poland goes through as well to go even faster. But bear in mind that is a TCX car, so we would expect the BMW on single lap speed to be quicker than the TCR entries, at least at this phase of the race. Colin White goes over the line to go quicker again, and he's 1.7 seconds clear of Poland's time. So the man from Glastonbury in the southwest of England doing a 1:54 flat there in the CWS Engineering Ginetta. Good pace this early in the day, Joe.
They're just beginning, Johnny, to get those cars and those tyres up to optimum operating temperature. It was a bit truncated with that yellow flag section. That will have stifled a lot of these cars and drivers getting into their groove, but also, especially the TCR cars, it's all about getting those rear tyres up to temp, and we'll see those TCR cars literally going faster and faster as we get into the session. Colin White, though, outstanding lap there, and I just noted your comment, Johnny, on watching in car with the TCR car there about the braking point. I think you're used to watching DTM,
probably,
where the braking point is at the 50-metre board. We were braking at the 150, 200 metres board, which is more back to normality there a little bit rather than science fiction.
Yeah, just recalibrating the brain for normal cars rather than F1 and DTM, as you say, where you seem to be heading off into the trees, frankly, before you hit the brakes in those amazingly high-tech cars that frequently venture out onto the Hockenheimring asphalt. So Yannick Mettler is now heading out onto track. Yannick's already been out in the session with a 2:436, but clearly the Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power VW Golf, that's the 112 numbered car, has gone into the pits for the team to adjust something, maybe simply tyre pressures, and then the car returns to the track. So 2 Autorama Motorsport VW Golfs, the 112, and defending champions the number 1. Car 1 is being driven by Emil Heyerdahl, as Colin White goes even faster, 1:51.224 now for his Ginetta G55, and is staying out for at least one more lap, heading up to turns 2, 3 and 4 now. So very tricky on approach, the sharp right-hander which takes you effectively onto the infield section. That's the departure from the old Grand Prix track, and you then head through the Parabolica at turn 5. So Colin's car has been good single lap speed. It struggled, Paul Ricard, a little bit with reliability and a variety of issues as well, but they did finally get it sorted, and I believe from memory the car did cross the line for its final lap as well, which would have been a shot in the arm for the whole team, looking for better fortunes here in Germany. Sorry, Joe, you were about to say.
I was just about to say, keep an eye on that number 1 and also the number 112. Yannick Mettler in the 112, Emil Heyerdahl in the number 1. It's carrying that number 1 for a reason. It's won championships. And just as I was about to say that, he's gone to second place overall, fastest in TCR. His time, a 1:51.398 in comparison to a 1:51.2. And as I say that, Colin White disappears off the top of the grid, and up pops the number 188, Matthew Detry, a 151.014. Still very, very tight though. Only literally matters of tenths and hundredths of second being the difference in where these cars appear on the timing screen.
Yeah, but a very good time from a TCR car there to go quicker than Colin White. I was suggesting that it would be a TCX car outpacing TCRs, but Mathieu Detry obviously going against that comment very early on. Still time yet, though, for the three TCX cars rather, to go quicker. So we've got Colin White's Ginetta in that category. We've got Luigi Stanco in the Seat Leon Cup Racer from also Autorama Motorsport, but that's not eligible for TCR points, so they put it into TCX, have the 24H series. And the third car in that category is Marco Poland in the Munkoff Racing BMW M4. Best time from a TCE car yesterday in free practice was a 151.634. So we're already 0.6 of a second faster than that. That was Colin White's Ginetta G55 for John Bruno and Colin White, set in yesterday's 1 hour and 20 minute long session. But clearly track conditions and also driver experience increasing, getting better all the time. And when the times were set yesterday evening, that may well have been when the rain had started to pour as well. Although actually 151.6 suggests to me that they were still dry conditions, but possibly not quite as good as we have this morning. Very green track, of course, because as Ben was describing, lots of overnight rain. But the grip is clearly there, as Mathieu Detry's just proven again, because he's gone nearly a second faster. 150.335 now for the AC Motorsport Audi.
That was an outstanding lap, and we're already halfway through this qualifying session. You know what, I wouldn't be surprised to see us just on the fringes of 48s maybe, as this track rubbers up. And it might not be towards the end of this session, but certainly into the race when we start pushing on. But a 150.3, we might just dip into the 49. And as I say that, Colin White into the 49s with a 1 minute 49.8. This is turning into a fist fight, isn't it?
It's great. Fantastic battling on track for admittedly something as simple as where you start a 12-hour race, but there are bragging rights out there. And also, as I say, I think you're safer, you have more of a chance of getting through turn one at the start of the race if you're at the sharp end, and it gives you a good chance as well of performing well in the first part of the race. Remember, this is a 12-hour race split across 2 days, so the cars will be parked up at the end of today in parc fermé conditions, so you won't be able to do anything to them bar tomorrow, clean the windscreen, adjust the door mirrors. You can switch your driver over as well, but otherwise whatever fuel is in the car by the end of today has to stay the same into tomorrow. You can't change tyres either, and everything is locked down effectively for the overnight period before we get going again tomorrow. VW Golf, car 105 for Rimvidas Savickas, heads out of the sequence of corners at 2, 3 and 4 on towards the Parabolica. GSR Motorsport is the entry for this VW Golf GTI spec with a sequential gearbox, unlike the other Golfs that are in the race that have the DSG, by the way. And the 105 car heading up to the hairpin. Briefly a lock from the rear tyre there as it became unweighted. All the weight lurching to the front of the car and to the front left, as well as he then turned in through hairpin turn 6 and through the kink at 7, and then leaping on the brakes again into the Mercedes left-hander, and then power out of there through 9 and 10 and on towards the arena section of this Hockenheimring circuit. Colin White due across the line imminently. He hasn't been setting personal best times through this particular lap, so I think the 149.819 is safe for the moment. Still an incredibly good time though for the Brit, and Mathieu Detry's only half a second away, as there's potentially been an incident now, Joe, at turn 2 with yellow flags being displayed there.
Yeah, turn 2 showing yellow flags, and just as Colin White enters the pits, he's obviously happy with that 1 minute 49.8, and Colin White into the pits, not sure.
It's Detry. Mathieu Detry, second fastest. He's in the gravel at turn 2. Dear me, and that's surely going to... It's a red flag, in fact, so it's brought the session to a pause with how long left on the clock? I've got 10 minutes 40 seconds still to go, so we are just hovering around 2/3 distance, Joe.
When you say he's in the gravel, Johnny, he's not just in the gravel, he's almost under the gravel.
Yeah.
That car is dug very, very deep in there, and you know what? The gravel's just doing its job. The gravel has stopped that car way before it got anywhere near a barrier, so it will just mean that Audi be very deep cleansed, need to be very deep cleansed of all of those little bits of gravel. I that have been in gravel traps, because you can see gravel will just get everywhere and anywhere. And the question is, and as I was about to ask that question, Johnny, it's been answered for me. We've got a red flag, so we've brought the session to a halt, which means the clock will stop, and the clock stopped at 10 minutes and 40 seconds to go. So we are intending from that, I would imagine we are intending and continuing this qualifying for the final 10 minutes.
Yeah. So just roughly around a third of it still to go. Mathieu Detry moving around in the car, which is a good sign. The A Marshal to the scene to open the door of the number 188 car, but that may well take one of our really swift machines in this session out of the equation, because I don't think the team are going to be too keen on returning that to the car to the session too quickly, because gravel gets everywhere and they want to check the car out before it's sent out for more qualifying. Recovery crew is on the scene though, with the towing strop just being attached now, Joe.
I certainly wouldn't be keen on sending that on sort of dusting that car off and sending it back out for 10 minutes. All right, he's on the provisional front row at the moment. He's got the both of the Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power cars breathing down his neck in third and fourth. Yannick Mettler in the 112 in third. He is only a second off, so more time to come from them. And likewise, only literally 5/500ths of a second behind Mettler is teammate Emil Heyerdahl in the number 1, who again will... The problem is, I suppose, I talk about this a lot, and that's because it really is that important. It's the rear tyres. Getting the rear tyres to work on a front-wheel drive car is all important. And now everything's going to cool off. We may be, for us, Johnny, we're in the entertainment business, and I think towards the end of the 10 minutes, the final 10 minutes of this session, I think that's when things are going to get very, very busy.
Well, the message on my screen now to the 188 crew is that if the car were to return to the track, then the message is stay well over the driver's left, because the next problem, if the car does tootle back to the pits under its own steam, it's going to start spilling gravel all over the racetrack as well. So the better bet is probably for that car just to be parked until the end of the session and then return to the team. Of course, Mathieu Detry may have other ideas, and the very large green tractor, I'm assuming, isn't part of the TCE entry. However, it is crucial to our recovery crews, and it's heading down to start-finish straight now towards turn 2. So we'll get to see what sort of turning ability this tractor has as it ventures towards turn 1. It'll lurch over onto its left side door handle, probably.
I think we might have a race series here, Johnny.
I'm all for
20
that.
of them.
Oh, track limits there, quite possibly, though. Nowhere near the apex, Joe.
No, we're gonna have to ping him for that one. No disrespect to Matthew, but he is only the driver, and a decision like shall we continue is probably going to be taken from the team manager or the crew chief, as we call it. That will be a decision for the team, and certainly if I was in that pit garage for the SE Motorsport pit garage, and we know the team, we know how sensible they are. They know how to do well at these events, and I would think that it would be probably the best idea to get that car in and just start on the race prep for that car. It's only 10 minutes. You don't want to chance it for the sake of a piece of gravel getting in behind a brake pad and a brake disc and just destroying a front corner potentially.
Yeah, no, not worth the risk. I agree. Race results to date for the 188 crew. They managed to finish 4th in the Dubai 24 hours. Then we went on to Mugello, where they finished 3rd in April, and at Ricard another 3rd place. So a win this year has rather eluded them. They have made a driver tweak to the lineup this weekend because David Dumont joined the crew of Stéphane Perrin and Mathieu Detry in France. But here in Germany, they are welcoming a new driver for me, Stefan Wieninger, who is part of the 3-driver lineup for the 12 hours. And he has raced in 24H series in the past, but with LMS Engineering, when we used to have a category called SP2 in this race series. So Wieninger appearing in an Audi TT RS 2-litre, as opposed to the Audi which is in the TCR category, the booted version of the Audi RS3. Being dragged all the way through the gravel, and now the front wheel starts to rotate, thankfully. But the front splitter on this Audi just serving as a scoop, basically, and bringing a load of gravel with it.
It's a big shovel, that, isn't it?
It is rather, yeah.
It is, yeah.
So
our regular listeners and viewers, Johnny, may be noticing that there is an omission on the entry list, and that is one of the Red Camel's Jordan Cupra.
Yes.
Not being present in the TCR field. Well, Red Camel's Jordan are here, and we'll see them out shortly in the GT qualifying because they've, I'm not going to say moved up, they've moved across, and they're in a Porsche, and it's the new Cup car that they're going to be campaigning. It's been placed in the GTX category,
yes,
and we'll be talking about them. So they're out of they're not competing in TCR this weekend, but they are here, and we will be seeing them very shortly.
Good stuff. Looking forward to that. That's Joe Bradley. I'm Johnny Palmer. You're tuned to RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels, qualifying for the 12 hours of Hockenheimring for 2021. And whilst the session has been red flagged for recovery of car 188, we can hear from Ben Constanduris in the pit lane.
He has a few things going on down here, Johnny. Obviously, we saw the top car stop at the early part of the session. That's now been towed into pit lane, and the mechanics have pounced on the engine bay, so no kind of mechanical drive issues like a drive shaft or something like that. It does seem to be something more linked to the engine and the block. No rush to try and capitalise on this red flag and get yourself a little bit of running. The other car that you may not have realised, that I didn't realise had an issue, was the 438, which is the ST Motorsport Samantha Tan BMW, the only other car I think in in the TCX, and that's just been wheeled into pit lane as well. So whether that's had a problem or whether she's getting ready to go out to the next session, perhaps. Might have got myself tied in knots here, but either way, that entered pit lane backwards. So plenty of action at the end of pit lane, down in pit box 1 to 4.
Sounds like it. That BMW, ST Racing BMW, has tended to run in the GT4 category in the past as part of GT Series. So hopefully Samantha and team will be ready to go for the next 30-minute segment. The Audi from AC Motorsport, car 188, is returning under its own steam, interestingly. Looking more like a rallycross car, though, Joe, with the dusty side trim to the wheels. Side walls is what I'm trying to venture for. Yes, go on.
Almost look like white wall tyres,
they
aren't
do.
they? Very sensible driving, though, from Detry as he went off track onto one of the run affairs there, again to shake off that gravel, get as much of the gravel off and out of their chassis from the under tray and the like. And he seems to be doing that and driving on the runoff areas to do so, and that's very sensible driving, putting as little amount of gravel onto the track, actually onto the racetrack, as he possibly can. So commendable. We've gone green, we're back out.
There you go. So the 112 car straight into the session once more. 10 minutes and 40 seconds starts to tick down, and this time will disappear very swiftly indeed, because it's going to take most cars 2 minutes plus to do an outlap and to start to get up to speed again. Colin White fastest. He stays at the wheel of the CWS Engineering Ginetta G55 and rejoins the session now. Remains to be seen what happens to the second fastest car, the 188, which is heading back to the pits. The team may assess that and run the risk of it rejoining the session. On the other hand, they're in a great spot, even if they don't do any more times, because they do hang on to the pole position in the TCR category and by half a second as well. So they may be weighing up whether Yannick Mettler can produce a time that's even faster than Mathieu Detry. At the moment, they're looking at a front row start in the TCE part of the race. So that might be enough, frankly, and they'll just then spend the time between now and the start of the first portion of the race with the air blowers, making sure that there's no loose bits of gravel in nasty places between brake calipers and pads, and in sections of suspension as well. So that work may well commence, and they'll just scratch the rest of qualifying. But in the meantime, Yannick Mettler and Emil Heyerdahl both out in their Outer Rummer Motorsport VW Golfs and running around on track the similar point of this 4.5 kilometre circuit as well. Trailing them is the Munkhoff Racing BMW M4 of Marco Poland again. So all teams, I think, sticking with their qualifying drivers. They've identified that they are, generally speaking, the fastest in each of the trios. One or two teams when we get to GT that are running 4 drivers. Actually, the GSR Motorsport crew have 4 drivers as well, and the BMW from ST Racing that we will see in due course. But with the exception of the 105 Golf, all the other cars in TCE are running 2 or 3 drivers. CWS Engineering going to be a busy couple of days for both Colin White and John Bruno, though, because they have been brave enough to enter the race with just the 2 drivers in car number 278.
Tough race, Johnny. It is split, though. Remember,
it is split.
It's one of our formatted split races.
Good point. Yeah.
It's not as grueling as a straightforward, straight through. Very civilised, I call it, where we'll be able to go off for some bratwurst and strudel this evening, and have a nice dinner, bed early, and then it's not exactly an early start or early restart as well tomorrow. So very civilised event here at Hockenheim.
Yeah, I haven't run through the full details of the race format. We're used to events being split, 12-hour races being split, 3 hours maybe on day 1 and 9 hours on the next day, or a 4 plus 8. But this one is 5.5. I'm getting mixed up now. Is it 5.5 today and 6.5 tomorrow, or the other way around?
I think it's 5.5 today, JP.
Right.
We're starting at. Now, I'm going to shut up because
okay.
I'm now getting mixed up with my UK times, my Central European times.
As I was talking, I was actually looking up the schedule, and I've unfortunately put a few clicks in the wrong place, and I don't know where I've ended up on the internet now. back. So, yeah, I will bring news to you on that in a moment or two. But basically, it's more or less a 50-50 split, but there's a half hour that favours one day rather than the other. To be honest, if you and I were designing a race weekend, Joe, this is what we'd go for. Because there's nothing in the morning on Saturday or Sunday, race-wise, and we're ending at about 8 o'clock both days. Fabulous. Just in time for tea.
We're in Germany, Johnny, and you know what? There's a rumour that you and I like the taste of beer, and we're better in the world
Don't know where that comes from.
To sample some German beer. It's the Germans, like the English and the British, like their beer, and we're British, so we do too.
Right,
so
here
very
we go.
Civilised.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So the race starts
indeed.
local time, 1:30 today through till 8 o'clock. So that's 6.5 hours today, and therefore 5.5 hours tomorrow, which is a 2:30 start on Sunday, again through till 8 o'clock. So we're doing over half of it today, and the mere 5.5 hours to bring it to the flag tomorrow, which, from a strategic point of view, is very interesting. I don't know whether we've ever had that before. Yes,
No.
the Hockenheimring 12 hours has run before, but I'll have to dig even deeper into the archives to work out what the split was previously. But it's intriguing, isn't it? Because we always talk about staying on the lead lap in those 3-hour, 4-hour races on the Friday, say at Mugello. It's going to be tough to do that after 6.5 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of a big ask. I think certainly when we've split these races before, we have a small amount of racing on day 1, and then the chunk of the race is day 2. So it's just about survival on day 1 and staying on the lead lap. And we'll talk about this more as we get to the build-up of the race, Johnny, but it's all about staying with the leader, because the leader could be leading by 90 seconds. When we go to the restart, that lead is down to a metre. So it's, however, today and tomorrow, I think if it was me, I'd just be out there and I'd just be doing what we do and just going for it and just think about it as a whole race distance rather than think about or overthink, I should say, the first part of this event.
GT's preparing themselves for the next 30-minute session, but we're not quite done with the TCE series. Colin White still motoring around, although the last lap was about 4 seconds off his best. So how are we doing, I wonder, on tyres? All of these cars running with the Hankook tyre. We are powered by Hankook for the 24H series once again in 2021. And to my mind, you can keep throwing tyres at cars to try and go even quicker in the latter stages. I wonder whether there's going to be some movement, quite possibly, for Emil Heyerdahl, who has gone quicker than his teammate Yannick Mettler. So now the Autorama Motorsport Golf number 1 jumps ahead of the 112 and has just set an absolute best time through the first sector with a 24.1 second first sector. 150.8 was Emil's best time, did that last time around. 51.7 is not too shabby at all through the middle sector, and an absolute best for Yannick Mettler through the middle sector as well. So with clearly both Autorama Motorsport VWs have chosen this moment of the session to really push on and go for the best time, which has been set so far by Mathieu Detry, ending up in the gravel trap at turn 2. It's a 150.335 to beat for both Emil Heyerdahl and Yannick Mettler. Heyerdahl coming out of the final corner to head across the line. Let's see where that puts him. It's a 150.519, so it is quicker than, it's a 149.965 for Mettler. So Heyerdahl did not go faster than Detry, but Yannick Mettler did. And with just over 2 minutes of the session still to go, new TCR pole sitter, Joe, Yannick Mettler in car 112.
Yeah, we expected this. I certainly expected to see these cars really come to the fore towards the end of this session, and that's what we've seen. I did expect Heyerdahl to be quicker than Mettler, so a bit of a surprise there. So money lost there for Bradley, but Yannick Mettler, outstanding lap. Still just under 2/10, let's call there a 10th and a half off the overall pole position in TCE, but it is only a TCX car ahead of him, and that's still Colin White on the provisional TCE pole. The time to beat there, 149.8, only 2 cars into the 49s, and one of them, as you said, Johnny, Yannick Mettler, great lap.
So the pole overall in TCE series still in the hands of Colin White. That's the reason why 278 is out front by 0.146 of a second. But this TCR scrap is really intriguing. You can barely take your eyes off it. It would be great to have had the 188 car still involved in the session as well. Sadly, that is in the pit lane, and the team have decided not to rejoin the session, which I think was the sensible option. So Yannick Mettler now only 0.146 of a second away from going quickest of all of the TCE cars, and then he will have a, well, to a certain extent, a little bit of clear road in front, because when the race starts this afternoon, there should be a bit of a gap between the GT Series pack and the TCEs behind. So ideally, they'll want to be on the right-hand side of the circuit on that front row. Yannick Mettler across the line and doesn't improve, although he did go quicker through the first sector on that lap. 24.4 represents Yannick's best first sector time.
He's going to squeeze in another lap as well, Johnny. Still 30 seconds as he crossed the line, down to just 15 seconds left on the timing screen now before we see the first checkered flag of the weekend.
Marco Poland will take no further part. The Munkoff Racing BMW heads into the pit lane, so that will leave us with 4 cars still out on track as the checkered flag waves now. But everybody that is still circulating, apart from now Rimvidas Savikas, who has seen the checkered flag, still has a chance to post one more time. There was no improvement from the Lithuanian, though, so the number 105's best time remains at a 152.648. Question is, what can Yannick Mettler do? Emil Heyerdahl still circulating in the number 1 car, as is Colin White in 278. At the moment, I'm not seeing personal best times through the first sector of the lap, the shortest of the 3. They're all into the middle part of this 4.5 kilometre circuit. That's a good time from Emil Heyerdahl in car number 1. 51.3 is his best middle sector to date, and has the chance maybe of getting ahead of Mathieu Detry by the end of this lap. 2:78 Colin White. Still pushing hard by the side of that throttle coming out of turn 8. Just wondering whether Colin was going to peel off at the end of the arena section and straight into the pits, but the body language of the car suggests he's still charging hard and looking to improve. Don't think this is going to be better than a 1:49.8 though, which is Colin's best time so far. Both of the Golfs have crossed the line, and that was improvement for Emil Heyerdahl, but not enough to get him ahead of Mathieu Detry. He falls short by 10 thousandths of a second, Emil Heyerdahl. That will put him 3rd in the TCR order and 4th for the TCE series. Colin White's the last car out on track. For the final time he comes through, then the Sud curve. Plenty of grass creep being taken as he crossed the line as well. A 1:51.020 for Colin White. So that was about 1.2 seconds off his best, but he was certainly pushing hard and using every bit of track available to him in the G55. Had already done enough though to take pole position in the TCX category, and that is the fastest time displayed from the whole of the session. 2:78 outpaces the 1:12 of Yannick Mettler and the 1:88 of AC Motorsport. And Ben Constanduris is neatly placed for reaction from that session fairly shortly. I get the feeling that GT Series will be underway very quickly, because we are behind time now, of course, after had to hit the pause button to recover the AC Motorsport car. But let's head to Ben for some reaction from that session.
Yeah, absolutely. Although Colin White was in the car, he was also standing beside me watching the session. A little issue with the timing screen there. So Colin, setting that lap time before the red flag, and it was enough to hold on to pole position.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. This is our other car we used in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So I haven't driven it. This is our first time driving the car. And with the rain last night, washed the track clean. So when we went out today, with new tyres on, it was very, very slippery. So we had to wait and wait and wait till the car come good.
It's going to be busy for you, just 2 drivers in the car for the full 12 hours.
Yeah, that's right. The trouble is Germany's locked down, and not many people can get out of England. You can go to Portugal, so Porto may will be busy, I think. Because we're working, we can come. But this night, one good thing is it's 6.5 hours today, or 5.5 hours today, 6 now, so we can have a sleep in between.
Give me a nice leisurely weekend here at Hockenheim.
Yeah, it'll be brilliant, because I've never been here before, and so it's going to be interesting to learn the track and gradually getting used to all of it. And it's nice over the years we go to all the different tracks with Creventic and get to see all of it and drive on it, and yeah, it's good.
You had a few issues with reliability in the last round, but obviously, as you mentioned, this is a new car, or a different car to the car you used last round. So is this a more reliable vehicle for you?
Well, yeah, the other car had done quite a lot of rounds, and it was due for an engine upgrade, and all the brakes and all the drive shafts, it was due. We was hoping it would last to the correct times before it sort of like really gave up, but we decided to pull the plug early, because I had enough. You know, we can go quick, but we can't stay there all the time. So this time we're going to drive a bit more carefully and not hurt it so much.
Cheers, Colin.
Cheers.
So Colin White, I knew he was endlessly talented, but to be able to do a qualifying lap and talk to Ben more or less at the same time is mightily impressive. Clearly he's also been either listening to us or paying attention to the lack of scheduling that I was bringing to the airwaves earlier on, because he mentioned it was 5.5 hours today. It is definitely 6.5 hours today, so 1:30 through till 8 o'clock, and then the 5.5 hours happens tomorrow. GTs have rocked and rolled very quickly into action, Joe. As I mentioned, we were behind time anyway. This session was due to start at 25 minutes to the hour, so organisers have wasted no time at all, and the track's got very, very busy all of a sudden.
Yeah, great organisation to get straight on with the GT categories, and I hope it's. I was kind of hoping it was a typo, Johnny, when I didn't see the number 91 car here, the Herbert car, the car that has pretty much dominated this series in 2021, and that car's not here. The sister car, the 92, is here. However, it's morphed into a Ferrari, so Herbert Motorsport in very unfamiliar territory with that 92 car. I'm going to be interested to see how well that team will do with that new machinery. It's a voyage of discovery for them.
It is rather, and I've been racking my brains to think back to the last time Herbert didn't race a Porsche. I do remember their rather troublesome time at Dubai when they had a Lamborghini, which basically kept catching fire. And I think they had it was a long time ago, and that was when we were first properly introduced to the Renault twins. And you know, things have changed a great deal since then, because they have been champions in this series, champions in the ADAC GT Masters. I'm just wondering whether there is a clashing weekend with ADAC GT Masters this weekend, and that's the reason why the kind of big pro team from Herbert aren't here this weekend. So that's a shame. And I can't see an immediate clash, actually, with that. So obviously commitments elsewhere mean that the 91 can't be here, nor so the normal 92 car. So they have changed to a Ferrari, and it'll be very interesting to get some news on exactly why that is the case. But, you know, a good team is a good race team, Joe. And if you can win a race in a Porsche, there's nothing to say that they won't be able to do the business in a prancing horse this time. Yeah,
I mean, a completely different car. The Porsche 911, with the way that the engine, the location of the engine, completely different style of driving. We talk about the 911 Porsche being, you know, very, very different in how you get the best out of them. With all of that weight on the rear of the car, it brings a distinctive style of driving to get the best out of them. Mid-engine Ferrari 488, though, a different kettle of fish. Completely. Jürgen Haring, Bobby Gonzalez, Tim Muller and Alfred Reinauer down to drive that 92 Ferrari, and those drivers, they are very familiar with one another, so that's a familiar environment for them to be in and around that team. It's just the car's a different shape. So like you say, Johnny, I'm pretty sure they'll get their head around it, and I'm pretty sure also that they've got one or two team personnel who are more familiar with running a Ferrari than maybe a Porsche. So I'm sure they're on top of that, and they've got to come into this as one of the favourites, but perhaps not quite as a bigger favourite as the number 11, the Middle Cap Racing with Scuderia Praha Ferrari. Different driver in that number 11 car this weekend. Denis Vaschek, I think is how I think that's how you pronounce it.
It's a good start.
Good effort.
We'll hone that through the course of the weekend.
Yeah, Joseph Kral, Matthias Vibo in the Ferrari. Now this is the car that has hung on to the shirt tails, the only car that's been able to hang on to the shirt tails of the 91 Herbert Porsche in the previous two rounds at Ricard and Mugello. Now take away that 91 car and this number 11 Ferrari, this car would have pretty much dominated the series so far. So you can't discount this car being the absolute favourite to take this 12-hour race. However, this is endurance motor racing, and as we all know, anything can happen.
Denis Vaschek last raced in 2015, I make it, for the GT Russian squad. He is from the Czech Republic and has been racing for the last 10 years or so. I'll tell you about other drivers that have been installed for qualifying duties, as Max Edelhoff now goes fastest in the number 34 car collection Audi, the R8 LMS GT3 that we are so familiar to seeing in the 24H series in its familiar Kirchhoff blue and white colours, and it heads through the hairpin at turn 6 now. Seth Morris going fastest now though for Leiper Motorsport in the number 10 car, driving a Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo 2019. So Max Edelhoff second fastest, Martin Lechmann third quickest in the 88 car collection Audi, and Josef Kral, who had set the early pace, is now in the pit lane, which is exactly where Ben is.
But they are not out in qualifying right now. They're the only car not to be out in qualifying.
But I can hear you, Ben, but I'm not sure any other people are, sadly.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, I'll tell you anyway, Johnny. You can tell the rest of the world.
Tell me in my ears.
There is engine issues for that car, I'm afraid.
We've got you now. So you are live.
Okay, good. Yes, so issues for the Brukers squad, who have exchanged their Seat for a Porsche this weekend in the GTX category, an older 991 car. And a shake of the head from Rick, walks away, and it doesn't look like there's even any effort to try and get this car or work on this car at this point for the qualifying session, but even for the race. So this could be disastrous for the Breukers squad, and Evo just now appearing at the back of the garage.
Well, see, that's actually a brand new Carrera Cup car for the new spec, the 992 spec of cars, which is slowly infiltrating Carrera Cup championships around the world, and the type of car that will be racing at Monaco this weekend as well in support of the Monaco Grand Prix. So they've only just got hold of that car, Joe. It was delivered, I think, on Thursday, and has been raced in the Porsche Carrera Cup Benelux Championship in the past by a guy called John de Wilde. The orange panels, the wrap panels have been applied to it. Looks great, but if it doesn't go anywhere, that's more disappointment for the second round running, actually, for the Breukers family.
Yeah, and it's how you react to that, Johnny, when, you know, they've been campaigning the TCR Cupra for a couple of 2 or 3 seasons now, and they knew that car inside out. It's completely brand new to them. So when you know, the vagaries of running a racing car, you know, when something happens, you've probably experienced before into your 2nd or 3rd season, but into your 2nd hour of running this car, or the 2nd day of running this car, everything's new, and it's all that reacting to the adversity of a car that's not working. I couldn't quite hear Ben and whether they've gotten to the bottom of what the problem is, Johnny. Is it a non-starter, or what's the issue exactly?
I don't think that the family know a great deal about it. There's much scratching of heads being done at the back of the garage. Whether they're chasing a number of problems, not quite sure. But I think I sense there's more information to extract from that whole incident, or the various problems. So more to follow on that, I think, is the answer, Joe.
That's a shame. That is a big shame. I was looking forward to seeing them out in that car.
Yeah, well, because the cars look great. I mean, I saw 20 odd of them last weekend at the Red Bull Ring as part of the Benelux Championship, and they are, I mean, they still sound superb, obviously, because in the rear of them is the 4-litre flat 6 classic Porsche. But the whole rear of the car has been reprofiled, and the front as well, but it's the rear that is most striking, and those enjoying our coverage on the live stream won't have seen that yet, because it's rearward into the garage. Fingers crossed we will see that car at some stage, though. Now, Seth Morris, who's never taken part in the 24H series before, he is a former Ginetta Junior champion, if you go back 10 years, unbelievably, and a former British GT champion in 2017, running in the NLS Championship. So I would imagine spending quite a bit of his time in Germany these days. Has run for NLS, in the NLS, as part of the Valkenhorst Motorsport Cup 5 challenge, but clearly he's built up a relationship with Lippert Motorsport and is running the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. Now, we're used to Lippert Motorsport running cup cars, Lamborghini Huracan Cup cars, but this is a full spec GT3 machine, and Seb fastest so far, but only by 0.003 of a second, faster than Pierre Caffer's Rudtronic Racing Audi R8. And there are 3 Audis, 2nd, 3rd and 4th currently, with Max Edelhoff and Martin Lechman in the 34 and 88 cars, also right on the pace. Ben, have you got something else from the pits before we deal with other drivers in this session?
I do, Johnny. Sorry, I turned my microphone off. I just chatted to the Breukers family, and when changing the rear drive shafts to get them ready for the endurance spec and endurance race, they have nicked a sensor. These beastly new cars with all their sensors, and unfortunately that means that the car won't start. Not a worry for the race, though. They'll be able to change that sensor and get themselves out for the race, and they're very, very much looking forward to getting some laps in, because they haven't got a huge amount of experience, and as Rick said, it drives very, very differently to what he's been used to, even in GT3 racing.
Yeah, because that really successful year he had at the start of 19, was it? But that was in a Lamborghini?
Lamborghini,
yeah.
GTD and Daytona and Sebring.
That's right.
And Dubai also. It's exactly what I said, Johnny. Doing some work on the car, they've nipped a sensor. Now, they'll never nip that sensor again when they do that same job. And that's the kind of thing I was talking about, with accruing experience in how to work on a particular kind of race car. And that's something that, you know, can happen. it's certainly happened to me many times, and so that's exactly what I mean, and I'm sure they'll get their heads around that and get that car into the race. After all, we argued. I think qualifying is all important if you want to stay out of trouble, and certainly that turn 1 bottleneck that you described, Johnny, it's a very fast turn 1 here at Hockenheim. So I'm expecting a little bit of entertainment there, and I hope I'm proved wrong, but you never know.
Entertainment in inverted commas. I kind of know what you mean, though. There'll be something that doesn't quite go to plan for one or two teams, particularly in the early laps at turn number 1. This track almost designed for elements of error, mistake creeping in, as Josef Kral has put things right again. So he was outpaced initially by Seth Morris and Pierre Caffer and Max Edelhoff, but he's got back to the top of the times now by 44 thousandths of a second. He's about to head to a yellow flag zone, though, because there are yellows out at turn 2. 139.109 is an even better time for Josef Kral, producing a personal best through the middle sector, an absolute best in the final sector. And the yellows at turn 2, well, the reason for that not immediately obvious, because Josef has just gone through. I can see what it is now. It's the 58 Mercedes of David Gosner, who has spun to the outside of the corner, so beyond turn 2 and almost at turn 3. That car has rotated and ended in a very awkward position, Joe, and we go code 60 because of that.
Yeah, code 60, which means that we're not going to stop the clock, Johnny. The clock is going to continue to count down. We're already heading towards half distance. We're about 15 seconds away from the half distance in this qualifying session. So unlike the TCE session where we stop the clock to recover a car, we're going to recover that car under code 60 conditions. Now this means that with time running out, if you were planning on banging on a new set of tyres and bringing those tyres up to optimum temperature before you went for a lap time, then you're going to have to adjust your plan somewhat. And no surprise to see Josef Kral eventually ending up the top of that timing screen in that number 11 Ferrari, 1:39.1. That's a pretty good time, Johnny, but he's just under 0.4 of a second. And Seth Morris, who's just gone on his outlap, he'll be able to bring his tyres up nicely, slowly up to temperature in readiness for when we go green.
So code 60 is something we see regularly in the 24H Series races as well. It's kind of like a virtual safety car or a full course yellow. The 60 in code 60 simply means 60 kilometres per hour, and everybody is restricted to that speed whilst marshals descend onto the track and recover a car in this case, or they might need to repair a bit of track infrastructure as well, maybe a barrier, but it's a relatively easy recovery this, because the rear wheels dropped into the gravel trap for car 58, but it wasn't as far into the gravel as Mathieu Detry managed during the TCE series part of qualifying. So now that the car's back on hard standing, the number 58 Mercedes from MP Racing, may well be that car can head back into the session under its own steam, although I'm sure first job will be for David Gosner to head to the pits, again for the team to check the car over. And as Joe mentions, this is still eating into the session time. Everybody, though, can stay out on track. A lot of drivers deciding not to do that and continue to burn fuel, though, because the whole point of qualifying is that you run very light, and maybe fuel had only been put in for a couple of laps, so rather than expend that, and just get Johnny, back into the pits.
Yeah, by the way, fueling is on the pit out end of the pit lane. So it will be, we will see cars being brought into pit lane and serviced on the pit apron, and when they leave the front of their pit garage, that is when they'll take on fuel. So you were spot on there that they would have been running a relatively low amount of fuel for their qualifying run. And you know what, the clock is still ticking. We're down to 12.5 minutes now, Johnny, so it's maybe whether they've got enough fuel for maybe 1 or 2 more laps remains to be seen, but it's going to be ideal because they'll be able to throw on some new tyres. The fuel load is going to be even lighter. In a light race car, it's just physics. A lighter race car will go quicker.
Yep.
More grip from the tyres. We should see those times come down, I would think.
Well, that's the theory, definitely. Great point that you make about fueling. I'd not thought about that for this weekend, but that again has to go into a little segment of the strategy book in terms of when you pit and at what point is it safe to get a car to the fueling area. It's more difficult to judge, I would say, in terms of a free pump, because everyone knows whether there's a free bay if you're straight into fuel, as you are in Mugello, for instance, whereas you've got to factor in doing the pit stop first, and then by the time you get to fuel, will there be somewhere free for you to take some fuel on board? So these little changes, race to race, all have to be thought about. Code 60's been withdrawn, and now we go back to qualifying pace again. But for Thierry Vermeulen, the 989 car is now heading into the fueling area. My, that is tight on the entry to the fueling quadrant, Joe.
It's a 20 km/h speed limit as well, Johnny, which is different to the 40 km/h speed limit in the pit lane. So 40 km/h in the pit lane, turn right into fueling, half it down to, and 20 km/h. That's absolutely crawling. You've just been doing 140 miles an hour down the back straight here, and then you come into the pit lane down to 40. You're crawling. Get into the fueling. I'm almost stopped. That's what it must feel like.
But you've got to the left a concrete wall, and to the right some metal railings that are housed in kind of big, large concrete blocks, dropped into those concrete blocks so that they stay upright. And there's really very little margin for error in quite a wide GT3 car. Everybody uses the same fueling area, but there is the potential for certainly the odd dive plane to go for a Burton if you misjudge the dimensions of your car. The Herring-sponsored Herbert prepared Ferrari heads back into the session. Red Ferrari with the black roof looks very smart indeed, but highly unusual for Herbert Motorsport to be running one of those cars. It's the 2019 Evo of the 488 with the turbo inlet vents just in front of the rear wheel arch, and that car being driven by Alfred Renauer, number 92, 8th fastest so far. Josef Kral in a similar machine, also an Evo 2019 Ferrari fastest. His time a 1:39.109 and a 1:39.490 is still Seth Morris's best effort in the Lippert Motorsport Huracan GT3. So just 0.381 of a second between the two fastest cars. Then Pierre Caffer in his Rutronic Racing by TECE Audi. The Porsche of Higeli by T2 Racing 911 GT3R. That's a Gen 2 991 Porsche for Manuel Lauch, and is fourth quickest ahead of Max Edelhoff and Christian Kranenberg in car number 88, which is the other Car Collection Motorsport Audi. Other drivers to speak of: David Gosner, spoken about him, the 58 MP Racing pilot. Alfred Renauer in the Ferrari. Charles Espenlaub is giving qualifying duty in the 85 CP Racing Mercedes. The 911 Racing Porsche, for fans of NLS and VLN through the years, they will recognise that car. Tim Scheerbarth at the wheel of the 719. Thierry Vermeulen, that car has just, or is still being refuelled, 989 from the 991 class. And the MRS GT Racing Porsche is the fastest in that division. The quickest GTX car so far is Tim Scheerbarth's 719 Porsche, but second fastest Horst Felbermayr Jr. in the Reiter Engineering prepared KTM. And actually Nico Pronk now goes even quicker in a similar KTM, also from Reiter, 1:43.279. That'll put the numbered 725 car second fastest in GTX. We got Fabrizio Broggi in the 991 955 car. Glenn Van Berlo 925, also in the 991 class. Ramon Werner in car 920. All of these are Porsches. Andre Mukavos, who was in action last weekend in the Benelux Championship, he's driving car 909 for the Duvo Racing crew of Luxembourg. NKPP Racing by Baz Kooten Racing are in the event. Baz Barenbrug, probably Berg, is in the number 991 car. Rodrigue Guillon, fastest in GT4 in his 401 Aston Martin from Pro Sport. And the ST Racing car, we had slight doubts about that, but it is in the session, car 438 for Nick Whitmer. And finally, Arno Gomez in the 701 Vortex is circulating. The only car we don't have is the Red Camel Jordans.nl Porsche Cup car, which is entered into GTX this weekend. It's in GTX because the 991 class does not yet allow the new Porsche Cup car into it. So if you've got a 992 generation Porsche, you have to run in GTX. With 6.5 minutes to go, and Josef Kral leads the session, Joe, but from the pit lane. He's just headed into fuel. No, he hasn't.
Yep.
He's just headed back out on the track, in fact.
Just about to say, Johnny, we've been watching Josef Kral sat in the pits. He's now just taking on enough fuel for potentially 6 minutes of driving. I'm hoping he has. I hope he hasn't put a race fuel load on that car, and I hope he's thinking about just consolidating that 0.4 of a second gap. It's, to be exact, it's 0.381 of a second, the gap between himself and Seth Morris. And hey, isn't it great to have Seth Morris here? Familiar driver, familiar surroundings for Seb is the Bentley Continental that he's been driving for Parker Racing in the British GP Championship, and as you said, Johnny, winner of that series in 2017. But as I say that, the number 10 Lippert Motorsport Lamborghini of Seb Morris has come into the pits, so he's currently second. Pierre Caffer, though, he's still out there, so we may still get our grandstand finish.
Just hearing from Natasha Mark, who is working as hard as always for the 0221 crew, our TV directors and producers, and actually some news on the Vortex from yesterday, involved in a big crash during practice. So the Vortex is in the session, but has already had its dramas. The driver was in there. I understand one of the drivers actually went to hospital that was involved in the crash. So there may well have been a change in the driver lineup. That's something for me to certainly research between now and the start of the race. So we need to find out who was involved in that incident and obviously send on our best wishes. But the Vortex has not had a good start to the weekend. Is producing some decent times now, though. 148.704 for car 701 entered into GTX. The GT3 leaders remain Middle Cap Racing by Scuderia Praha, Car Collection Audi. There's a car in the war, which is the GT4 pace setter for Rodrigue Guillon, now actually second fastest in this division, but the very smartly turned out Aston Martin Vantage AMR GT4 has found the green tyre wall, gravel trap, and I'm struggling to work out where that is on the circuit, but Rodrigue Guillon with what looks like a fast off. Oh, it's on the arena section,
Sachs
I reckon,
curve.
Joe. Sachs Curve,
Yeah,
yes.
I think it's Sachs Curve, yeah. That iconic location here at Hockenheim has seen Rodrigue Guillon looking like he's just gone straight on there, Johnny. Not sure whether he was helped into that gravel trap. Just looking at the trajectory as the entry into the 180 degree. We used to call that a hairpin. It's now a sweeping 180-degree curve, really, in comparison to the other hairpin
flag,
on
Joe.
this track.
Yes.
We're stopping, yeah. I can't see this restarting, Johnny, with only 4 minutes remaining.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because it takes about 2 minutes to do an outlap, although no, slightly quicker than that in a GT3 car, but really, because we're behind time anyway, and it's a full programme of support races here as well, there will be no restart, and that's now confirmed on my screen. So that locks everybody into position, Joe. One of those sessions that you really had to be on the pace very early on in it, and Josef Kral, well, set the fastest time initially, then dropped to fourth because of the good speed from Seth Morris, from Pierre Caffer and from Max Edelhoff, but he went back out again, I assume on a new set of Hankook tyres, and really laid down the pace, and is quicker than everybody else by 0.375 of a second. But unfortunately, there are a few stories out of this session which see cars that need to be repaired, or in the case of the 999 Red Camel Jordans.nl Porsche, they didn't even start the session because of drive shaft problems. So work to be done for a number of teams between now and the 1:30 local time for the race, Joe.
You know what? I think we've been cheated a little bit here. Max Edelhoff went out and, you know, probably a new set of Hankooks, that's to be confirmed, but my estimation would be that he put on some new tyres and went out there and immediately put in a personal best of a 139.484. That put him onto the front row of the grid there alongside Josef Kral. And if it wasn't for that red flag, I think there was probably a little bit more time coming. Whether there was 4/10, we'll never know, and that's where I think we've been robbed.
Yeah, I agree. There were some good lap times about to be set, but we will never know, and therefore the positions are as they were just before the red flag. So the 11 Middle Cap Racing by Scuderia Praha Ferrari quickest, 1:39.109 from the 34 Car Collection Motorsport and the Leipert Lamborghini of Seth Morris. Rutronic Racing for Pierre Caffer, 4th quickest, ahead of the Higeli by T2 Racing Porsche. Then you got the 92 Herbert Ferrari, sounds weird to say that, the CP Racing Mercedes 7th, and the 8th place was the Car Collection Motorsport number 88 Audi. 9th position for Peter Cox's Writer Engineering KTM Crossbow. David Gosner had a spin, set 10th place in the MP Racing Mercedes. The 9 und 11 Racing 719 was fastest 991 class car, ahead of another KTM from Reiter, the Baz Kooten Racing Porsche, another Cup car, as was the MRS GT Racing 989. Willi Motorsport by Ebby Motors and Stadler Motorsport complete the top 16. Then the Duvo Racing Porsche Cup car ahead of the NKPP Racing similar machine, Vortex V8 701, crash yesterday, but was on the pace kind of today. The ST Racing 438 BMW was the fastest GT4 car ahead of the Pro Sport Racing Aston Martin that ended up in the wall. We didn't see any laps from Red Campbell Jordans.NL's Porsche. And for the TCE series that was held earlier, and the 30-minute session saw that the number 278 Colin White Ginetta was fastest, but a really good scrap right behind with Yannick Mettler outpacing the AC Motorsport Audi. So it'll be Ginetta, Golf, Audi, your top 3 in the TCE series. That is it as far as qualifying is concerned, so we can now look forward to the race, which starts at 1:30 Central European Summertime, but our build-up is from 1 o'clock right here on RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. You can join Ben Constanduris, Joe Bradley and me, Johnny Palmer, for that. We will see you later.
One championship, 8 races, legendary circuits, drivers from all over the world, one family, one passion, endurance racing. Welcome to the most professional endurance racing series for all drivers, amateurs, semi-professional and professional. Welcome to the 24-hour series powered by Hankook. Round 1, the Hankook 24 Hours of Dubai. Round 2, the Hankook 12 Hours of Mugello. Round 3, the Hankook 12 Hours of Circuit Paul Ricard. Round 4, Hankook 12 Hours of the Hockenheimring. Round 5, Hankook 24 Hours of Portimao. Round 6, the Hankook 24 Hours of Barcelona for the Trofeo Fermi Valer. Round 7, the Coppa Florio for the Hankook 12 Hours of Sicily. Round 8, the Hankook 24 Hours of Sebring. Can you beat the challenge of 8 endurance races? Will you become the 24-hour series champion for 2021? This is endurance. Call your racing friends and register now.